The National Portrait Gallery in London is home to the most extensive collection of portraits anywhere in the world. From the 16th century to the present day, these works tell the story of portraiture through the ages. The greatest painters and photographers, the most iconic subjects. In this series, I've been granted unprecedented behind-the-scenes access as the gallery prepares to reopen its doors after 3 years, having completed a once-in-a-generation refurbishment. So far, I've seen how portrait painting became big business in the 17th and 18th centuries, and how early photographs brought a whole new audience to portraiture. In this final deep dive into the National Portrait Gallery's collection, we'll find out who the Bloomsbury Group were and how they approached portraiture in the age of the camera. We'll see how Elizabeth II became the most painted and photographed woman in the 20th century. And we'll take a look at how the gallery supports contemporary artists through new acquisitions. Plus, as the reopening gets closer, a mystery guest drops in to select their favourite work from the gallery's collection. The National Portrait Gallery is in the heart of London and welcomes over 1 million people every year. Like any major international gallery, it's important that visitors see themselves represented on the walls. This is especially important to curator Flavia Frigeri, and what better place to chat to her than alongside the women of the legendary Bloomsbury Group. Flavia, I know you've been working really hard for a number of years and you're about to sort of debut this new project. Tell me about it.
Yes, the project is called Reframing Narratives, Women in Portraiture, and it's supported by the Chanel Culture Fund. And it's a project meant to redress the gender imbalance in the collection.
So what sort of shape does that take? I mean, I guess there's a million different ways you could do it. Is it about acquisitions, research?
It's a mix of things. It's about acquisitions, commissions of new works, but also it's about researching the women who are already in the collection and giving them greater visibility.
You have a unique opportunity because you're not just trying to find women artists who've been left out of art history, but it's also about the sitters.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm a trained art historian. I've always only seen the artists, but with this project, I've been looking at women from all walks of life. Designers, scientists, the women who've really been trailblazers in their different fields, and in every field, they were confronted with some sort of issues. So it's really about like shattering the glass ceiling across the board. And you know, as I was working for the project, one of the mottos I had in my mind was a quote from one of Virginia Woolf's lectures. She said that it was the writer's occupation to kill the angel in the house to free the professional woman.
Yeah. That's so piercing. And yet, here's a painting of Virginia Woolf, and it doesn't look piercing at all. It's very sweet. She's sort of huddled in the armchair. Is that her knitting?
That's her knitting. And, you know, it's sometimes hard, in a way, when you're encountering such an intimate portrait, to imagine that she was a pioneer of literature. She invented modernist literature, the idea of, like, you know, the stream of consciousness. But here she's being painted by her sister, Vanessa, who's capturing this very intimate moment.
But the painting still really commands our attention because of its bravery, in the sense that we barely see her face.
Absolutely. It's intimate and feminine, but at the same time, from, you know, purely technical perspective, artistic perspective, it's radical. You know, you must think Vanessa was a pioneer in terms of modern British art. And she was very much like absorbing the language that was coming like from the Parisian avant-gardes, Cubism, Impressionism, you know, even just the quality, it's very sketch-like almost.
These people are sort of highly tuned in, aren't they? They're desperate to break free from conventionality and pull sources and inspirations from lots of different places. And I mean, I look at a painting like this and it tells you so much just as an image, but then also the relationships it reveals. I mean, you actually know more about who these people were and what was happening.
Yes, it was painted by Duncan Grant. who was very close to Vanessa Bell, despite her being married to Clive Bell. And together with Duncan Grant, Vanessa, who's portrayed here, set up the Omega workshops. And this was quite an original idea for the time. It was a setup where they were marrying essentially abstract modernist art with decoration. So they were making everything from like clothes to furniture to painting. And actually, Vanessa is wearing here a dress that very much captures that spirit, that ethos of the Omega workshops.
The entire Bloomsbury Group circles around these two women in their home, right? Vanessa Bell and Virginia Woolf.
Absolutely. They were coming together in Bloomsbury very informally, almost like they organised a salon that was happening at the home of Virginia Woolf and Vanessa Bell. And artists, writers were sharing ideas. They were the so-called modernist group of Britain at the time.
I mean, I love that Dorothy Parker quote where she says, they lived in squares, they painted in circles, and they made love in triangles. I mean, it's 100 years ago. But then what happens to the group?
Well, the group, sadly, in a way, disbands because of World War I. You must think all the joy, the ambition, the radicality comes to a sudden halt when World War I breaks out. And clearly most of them were completely opposed to it. They were conscientious objectors. And so the war dampens this really exuberant spirit.
Yeah, it's almost as if they thought the world could be one thing at the beginning of the century and it turned out to be something entirely different. The Reframing Narratives project is so important. We come to the National Portrait Gallery to understand and enjoy stories of British culture and society. People like Virginia Woolf and Vanessa Bell are absolutely fundamental to that story. And what we're understanding now is there are so many other voices that have been left out, and it's absolutely fascinating and tantalising to see what's uncovered. The National Portrait Gallery tells the story of Britain, and this didn't stop in times of war. Across paintings and photography, the First World War is represented. Rosie Broadley, curator of 20th century collections, has joined me to look at the artists and subjects from that time. Rosie, this is a lovely, quiet selection of work, but very evocative. Tell me about them.
So this is a group of portraits of war poets and artists, and they were all made at around the time of the First World War or shortly before. And they are very intimate because they're portraits that weren't made to be shown in a big gallery like this. They're personal portraits. For example, the portrait of Wilfred Owen is a really beautiful little photograph, but it's quite an ordinary sort of an object. It's the kind of photograph of a soldier just about to go off to battle that many families would have had made of a loved one. And he hadn't actually published any works before the war, so the photograph really does represent just an ordinary soldier. But for now, for us, it represents a really important literary figure. All of the poets represented here, apart from Charlotte Mew, who was also a war poet, died in the war.
Tell me about Charlotte Mew. It's such a slip of a piece of paper. It's barely there, there's not much paint on it, and yet it says so much.
Charlotte Mew is not a very well-known literary figure, and the reason that she's included in this group in the gallery is because we wanted to show that women were also writing war poetry and that they were doing it from the perspective of the home front, so very much thinking about the sort of loss and bereavement and grief of those who were left behind. There's this kind of sadness about it, which I think a lot of that generation must have carried with them in the decade after the First World War, just thinking about all of their lost friends and loved ones.
So Wilfred Owen, staggeringly important British poet, really tells us so much about this period in time. Who else is he joined by on the wall?
So next to him is Rupert Brooke, who is also one of the most famous, I think, war poets. And this photograph was taken in 1913, so before the war. And I think it really shows him as this kind of romantic figure that he did become, because he died in 1914, so just a year after this photograph was taken. And he kind of is fixed in the minds as this kind of beautiful young man who wrote so evocatively about England and what it would mean to lose his life for his country. The other portrait that's in this section is Isaac Rosenberg, and it's actually a self-portrait. So Isaac Rosenberg is well known as a war poet and was an incredibly amazing war poet, but he was also a trained artist. As the war began, he said that he felt himself to be more of a poet than a painter, and he died in 1918 on the Western Front, and it's a huge loss, but it's also clearly a loss because he was also a great artist.
I think this section on the war poets really shows one of the great strengths of the National Portrait Gallery, which is that this is a building very much about people, and it's about people looking at people. These are not grand history paintings on battlefields. They're quiet, they're sensitive, they're about these particular individuals. And as a consequence, we really empathise with these people. They give us a more direct experience of war. Since the invention of the camera, different methods had been tried to lend colour to photographs. But by 1932, one photographer in particular was fed up with what they described as wishy-washy hand tinting. She demanded a riot of colour. This was the artist known as Yevonde. Claire Freestone is curator of photographs at the National Portrait Gallery, and she looks at the power of Yvonne's images almost 100 years on.
Madame Yevonde was a 20th century pioneer and photographer. She started her own studio in 1914, but really operated for 60 years throughout the 20th century. Yevonde first took up photography really as a means to independence. She was looking through this suffragette magazine, Votes for Women, and she came across this advert by the suffragette photographer Lena Connell. And Lena Connell's photographs were disseminated at the time through postcards. There would be Christabel, Emmeline Pankhurst, Mrs. Despard, and these were Yvonne's heroines. And really then she was like, yes, this is, I know this is what I'm going to do. Yevonde actually did think she was an artist. She was really looking to be innovative. She was trying to find a way to make her portrait studio stand out. And she used this colour process and she really pushed it to its limit, using filters, different backdrops, different compositions. She loved satire, fantasy, myth, and she drew inspiration from art forms of various different kinds. At the end, we've got this amazing photograph of Joan Maud, the actress, and this was one of Yvonne's first colour works that was exhibited in 1932 at the Albany Galleries near Piccadilly. This was actually one of the first colour photography exhibitions in the UK. So this is an amazing photograph of Yvonne's cousin's wife, Dolly Campbell, and she gives an amazing account in her autobiography here, which was published in 1940. She says, "So we tried more glycerine, and unfortunately this time it got into the eyes, and mixing with the mascara on the lashes caused such exquisite pain that Dolly wept real tears, and for some minutes could do nothing but sit in misery, pressing her handkerchief urgently against the agony. When at last she was able to look up, her eyes were bloodshot and her expression so miserable that I rushed the focus and was able to take a face expressive of the utmost sorrow and pain." Finally, we have a set of separation negatives, and this has enabled us to really understand the breadth of Yvonne's colour practice. These are 3 separate glass plate negatives that would combine together to create a full colour image. And when these were sent to what was then the sort of first colour lab for professional photographers, these were printed with 3 different pigment tissues and fused together to create a full colour image. What's amazing is that this is a self-portrait that has recently come to light, and she here has placed her camera on Herbert Reed's treatise about modern art, written in 1933. It's called Art Now, so she's really saying, look, I'm an artist with a camera.
I love self-portraits, and this one for me has no diminishing returns. It's Laura Knight's painting from 1913, and it presents, at this time, one of the most taboo subjects in the art world, a woman artist painting a nude woman model. It's hard to believe now, but that was a complete and utter no-go in Laura Knight's age. And what Laura Knight is doing is this very clever composition. She's not only showing herself in the act of painting, we've seen that before from artists, but what she's showing is the live nude model who's there before her, and then in the background, the painting in progress. So it's a very meta way of delivering her point home, which is that I am here, I am one of the best. And in fact, she did smash those glass ceilings. She was the first British woman artist to become a dame. And no woman artist had been made a Royal Academician since the founding of the Royal Academy with someone like Angelica Kauffman. So it's not only a pointed statement about the status of women in the art world, it's also a complete tour de force of painting. Her body is painted in this really impressionistic style, and then she moves on to something much more classical for the nude. And then there's this quite modernist, reduced figure for the painting in progress. So, I mean, it's an incredible painting about an incredible artist really showing off her talent. And I'm really delighted to say that Laura Knight was a household name in her lifetime. She was very well accepted, she was very well paid, she was a commercial artist, she got what she deserved financially. Unfortunately, though, she's fallen more into the shadows. And I think the placement of this painting, with this fantastic vista as you come into the 20th Century Gallery, is exactly what Laura Knight deserves. Post-war, the interest in self-portraiture, particularly amongst artists themselves, exploded. I'm back with Rosie Broadley to discover how this new generation reached inside themselves and presented what they found. Rosie, thank you so much for preparing two of the most brilliant self-portraits by artists. I mean, it's one of my favourite things to look at, the way that artists portray themselves. And these are so striking.
They really are, yeah. They're some of our highlights from our 20th century collection. We've got L.S. Lowry, and then we've got Gluck.
So we associate Lowry with the kind of so-called stickmen, but this is something completely different.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a single figure. It's very confrontational. He's right there in front of you, sort of on the plane of the canvas. He did do a handful of self-portraits. This one is called The Man with Red Eyes. So in a way, he's sort of distancing himself from his own self-portrait by giving it that title.
Why do you think he did that?
He was a really private man. I mean, even though he became hugely famous and very popular, there's a lot we didn't know or don't know about his private life. And so I think that's a way of distancing himself from that scrutiny. And he created this kind of what he called a persona for his self-portraits. He's made a kind of template of this man, and he projects his own feelings onto that. We know that Larry's mother was very ill and dying, in fact, and he has written about how he was experiencing at this time extreme stress and tension, and that's all there in the painting.
So Lowry and Gluck wouldn't have known each other. They've got different styles. Of course, they're working in the same period, and they both tell us a lot about the advancement of self-portraiture. I have to tell you, Rosie, this is one of my favourite self-portraits of all time. What an absolutely amazing achievement to command an entire room through that chin.
It is, it's absolutely amazing. I agree with you, there doesn't seem to be anything else like it, where she's looking kind of down her nose at the canvas. She has this kind of incredible power and intensity in that work.
So it's unusual because at this time, this is a painting by Gluck, and actually it was the artist's wish to be known solely by their surname, no first name, in the sense sort of gender-neutral Gluck.
Yeah, absolutely. She said no prefix, no suffix, and no quotation marks. And as you can see, she presented herself in a masculine way. She had her hair cut very short. She dressed in suits, just really focused on her face, and incredibly powerful for that reason.
So obviously self-portraiture is so important to the gallery's collection because it says so much. Do you have it across many media?
Yeah, absolutely. So in addition to the numerous paintings that we have, we also have sculpture. For example, we've got an amazing sculpted self-portrait by Edoardo Paolozzi, where he's a kind of machine, sort of robotic figure. We also have a stained glass portrait by the amazing pop artist Pauline Botti.
I mean, there's something very particular about self-portraits in that they become a vehicle for the artist to say something about themselves.
I think these self-portraits are painted for the artists themselves as a kind of way to not just consider how they appear or, to learn to paint themselves, but also to sort of really study their psychology even, just to really look deep inside themselves.
Thank you so much, Rosie. I never tire of looking at self-portraits, and these two are such exquisite examples.
It's been a pleasure.
After spending so much time with portraits across the centuries, it's really wonderful to look at these works because they're quite particular. They weren't designed to be seen by a big public audience. They don't scream, they're not bombastic, they don't have a message. It's very personal. It's an artist scrutinising themselves. They're psychological. They say something about the artist, but they also say something about how portraiture contributes to art. And they remind us that portraiture is not in any way a sub-genre. It's like a main artery running through the history of art, pushing it forward, helping it innovate. In the final part of my journey through the National Portrait Gallery collection, I'll be joined by a much-loved artist and comedian. Ahead of the reopening, I'll give them the daunting task of selecting their favourite work from the gallery's vast collection. Jim, welcome to the National Portrait Gallery.
Well, thanks for bringing me here. And isn't it fantastic? It's like Christmas. they're all under wraps.
So tell me about your love of art.
Well, I grew up with it. My mum was always drawing and painting and going off and doing pottery and, on a weekend going and looking at art galleries. It wasn't forced upon us, me and my sister. It was just sort of there, what we lived in.
So I know you're a terrific landscape painter. We've seen you on Celebrity Landscape Artist of the Year. Tell me about your relationship with portraits, though.
Well, I've done a few portraits, self-portraits, and I've done a few for people, a few commissions. But out of all the galleries, I think this is probably my favourite, because who doesn't like looking at a face?
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know. And this is fantastic. I was just looking at these and getting really excited and just recognising people.
So has coming to the National Portrait Gallery informed your own art, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, any gallery does, but this collection, I think, is one of the best in the world. And I used to come here long ago, and I used to really like looking at the... you get those old 17th century portraits, and they're always... and the symbolism that's in them. And you'd get a fella or a woman, mainly a fella, who'd be pointing at an open book with the new chemical that is discovered, or a piece of land that they've just robbed from someone else.
Yeah, there's a lot of narrative. It's not just about faces, it's about people and time. So there's a portrait of your alter ego, Vic Reeves, your comedic creation that we all love so much, in the gallery's collection. How does that feel?
Is it on the wall? Or is it just in the bookshop, hidden at the back of all the bargain bins? Yeah, that's great. I've seen it. I think there's two. I think there's one of me eating a banana and another one of Bob and me from years ago. Yeah,
but that's really exciting. I mean, like, you're joining this illustrious lineage. It started with William Shakespeare, Jim, and now you're in the same company.
I don't think I'm putting myself down. Well, I'll have to do a portrait myself and get that hanging on the wall.
Right, so what I want to task you with, then, is this idea of this image of you running around the galleries. There's no public here, so you've got it all to yourself. We're really, really lucky. I'm going to set you loose. I'm going to let you go and have a really good wander around. And I want you to pick a portrait that you want to take home with you. You can't take it home with you.
No,
but that you, aspirationally, you would like to.
One that I'd like to have on my wall at home somewhere, yeah. All right, well, shall I run off now?
Run off, yeah.
Thank you.
Be good. From comedy royalty to actual royalty, if one face was painted and photographed more than any other, it was the late Queen Elizabeth II. I've seen close up how monarchs projected an image of themselves through art, all the way back to Henry VII and Elizabeth I. Now I want to look at our own Queen and explore how our relationship with her was shaped by photographs and paintings. I'm being joined by curator Alison Smith, who'll talk me through some of the defining images of Elizabeth II in the National Portrait Gallery collection. Alison, Queen Elizabeth II, an incomparable life, an incomparable reign, the most photographed and painted woman of the 20th century. What a subject for you.
Yes, we have more portraits of the late Queen in our collection than any other sitter. And these encompass her whole life, from when she was a sort of small child all the way through to her later years.
There's an interesting moment, isn't there? Because before the war, the royal family are so idealised, and, you know, the princess dresses. And then, you know, the war hits and everybody's in tweed and the tone of the images changes quite significantly, I think.
That's right. I think it's a sober period during the war. Post-war, there's this sort of slow sense of recovery when the Dior fashions come in and Elizabeth becomes quite a glamorous society figure, a debutante. You see this in photographs by Beaton, Dorothy Wilding, for example. There's something very exciting that she's heralding this new Elizabethan age.
So this is a commission for the National Portrait Gallery. It has been much talked about. It's a painting that a lot of people felt very strongly about when it was painted in 1969.
Yeah, so this is by Antigone, the Queen's favourite portrait painter, who she knew from having painted another portrait of her. It's unveiled, great ceremony, the whole gallery was festooned with flowers, people came in, obviously expecting to see something romantic, and they're confronted with this very severe image of the Queen looking sternly at you as if she's a sort of schoolmistress. So some people were a little bit taken aback because their image did not match their own perception of the Queen. And also, I think its size, it does overwhelm you. There is an account of one woman apparently marched up to it and threw a Bible at the portrait. Now, why a Bible? I've got no idea at all. But it just shows how the strong investment people have with images of the monarchy. But we know that Antigone himself, you know, really thought carefully about this image, and he said at the time that he wanted to show her alone, bearing the problems of her responsibility. You know, he realised that Shakespearean idea, uneasy lies the head that wears the crown. You're in a very lonely position when you are a ruler. It was also the time when there's a lot of intrusion into the private life of the royal family. So you feel this mask goes up with this portrait. She's saying, you'll have no access into my inner thoughts or feelings. I am the figurehead of the nation.
I know that Queen Elizabeth II was a very intelligent and well-informed woman when it came to art and culture, not to mention everything else. What do you think she made of all of the modern artists starting to take her picture?
I think it was from this point onwards, so many painters, photographers want to almost get behind the mask, so many of them, to show what she was like as an individual. So you think of photographs by David Montgomery, Lord Snowdon, Patrick Litchfield, David Bailey, Norman Parkinson. They all tried to capture a different facet of her. But the Queen obviously was so used to sitting for portraits, you almost have the feeling that she actually controlled the sitting, and she would only disclose so much about herself, only give away so much information. And I think there's a lot to do with her own inner strength, her own centredness, and sense of being secure within her personality and within her role. And this really comes across in Chris Levine's, because she's sitting there, almost just with her eyes closed, with a sense of deep inner peace and calm, like a Buddha or something like that. And she's almost saying to the viewer, you may be fascinated by me, I may be the most portrayed woman in the world, but this is as far as you can go. My eyes are shut, my inner world belongs to me alone.
On this journey, I've seen for myself the care and attention that the National Portrait Gallery team lavish on every work in the collection. Interestingly, this doesn't end with older paintings. Even contemporary photographs require specialist conservation work before the eyes of the world are upon them.
The photographs that are going to be put on display span the whole history of photography, right from 1839 up until virtually the present day. But actually, some of the more modern materials need almost more care than some of the older materials. So it's really important that we're looking after all of our photographs and not just to assume that just because something was made a few years ago, actually, it's more robust than some of the older ones. So, for example, you've probably got photographs of your own at home from the 1960s and 70s, and sometimes they look kind of orangey-brown colour. What that is one of the dyes that was used in colour photography in the 20th century was actually really unstable, and it can fade over time. It's kind of ironic that some of the older processes that were invented are actually more stable than some of the newer photographs that we have to work on. So at the moment, I'm working on a really incredible work. It's only actually a few years old. It was made by some brilliant photographers, Walter and Zoniel. This photograph is really quite unusual because it wasn't made from a negative, and it's not a digital photograph either. This particular image is also gilded, so that makes life a bit harder. This type of photograph is coated in a layer of gelatin, and gelatin is really hygroscopic. It actually can absorb up to 80% of its own weight in water. And so what that results in is that often these types of photographs can warp slightly. The trouble with this particular artwork is that this photograph may end up touching the glass and becoming damaged, or the gilding might flake off. There's lots of different issues that might occur because of this warping. So it's really important that we can put that right to make sure that it doesn't get damaged in the future.
The National Portrait Gallery looks back at the history of portraiture, but it also looks forward. Never more so than now. It's a full system reboot for a British institution. Thomas J. Price is one of many artists seeing his work in the National Portrait Gallery for the first time. For him, it's an extra special achievement.
So I'm really excited that Reaching Out is going to be placed at the new entrance, and it's going to be within a display of works from the collection. And I think it's going to be a really exciting way to establish a context for understanding this work and understanding the other works around it. You know, this piece critiques portraiture, it critiques monuments, it critiques statues. It really looks at our values as society, and it's asking the viewers, you know, what's important to them, and it's allowing the viewers to see themselves in this work. You know, it's a contemporary image of a young woman holding a mobile phone. I think it's something that we can relate to. And it's an image perhaps that hasn't been kind of given status, hasn't been given the celebration. And I think it represents a type of person, a young woman who hasn't been given celebration or visibility. And so to place that at the front of the National Portrait Gallery, to have it as part of the identity for the new gallery opening, is a really great moment to kind of show people where we can go. National Portrait Gallery has had such an influence on my work in terms of me wanting to really scrutinise portraiture and to look at, you know, who we value in society. And for me, I wanted to try and almost like inhabit the language of portraiture, inhabit the language of statues and monuments, but to make these objects different. So I was very lucky that my mother would take me and my two brothers to the MPG and to other museums quite regularly. This understanding came to me that there was nobody that looked really like my mother, and there was nobody certainly that looked like me and my brothers. And here we were in this kind of place that's supposed to represent who's important in society. And so the feeling kind of crept in that perhaps we weren't that important, but then we felt okay about ourselves. So I kind of always had this interest in exploring value and status and basically how we see each other. So I'm very lucky that, you know, a lot of my works can exist outside, because in that way you kind of have people who happen upon your works. You know, they're not necessarily going to see an artwork. They might be very used to statues and to monuments, and that's where I'm able to exploit that unawares element in their journey, and suddenly they're kind of confronted by or happen upon these works which look a lot like the things that they recognise from their lives, from history, these very traditional kind of statues and monuments, but in fact they have a very different feel and a familiar but different appearance. And so it kind of leads people down this path of questioning these things, these silent signalers that kind of are among us, to explore why they're there. You know, you kind of notice these things more when you're sort of startled out of your comfort zone in a way by something which is familiar but different. It's important also that they have a more casual kind of stance, and it's really about making us aware and value the everyday moments that we have, this kind of introspective element, as opposed to projecting images of power. It's about really celebrating the powers that we have within us.
Also seeing their work inside the National Portrait Gallery for the first time is an artist close to my heart.
The winner of Portrait Artist of the Year is Morag.
Morag was winner of Sky Art's Portrait Artist of the Year 2022, and her painting of actor and comedian Sir Lenny Henry is a recent arrival at the gallery ahead of its reopening. Morag, it's so nice to see you in the hallowed halls of the National Portrait Gallery, no less. Pretty incredible seeing it like this, in this quite undressed state as it prepares to reopen.
Yeah, I love it. It's amazing to see it like this.
So did you come here when you were young? I mean, how does it feel to be about to have your portrait of Lenny Henry on display?
It hasn't really sunk in much at all, but it's an incredible feeling, and I know that as a lot of time goes by, it will just sort of become better and better.
So did you come as a child? Did you come as an art student? Like, what's your relationship like with this place?
My mum used to bring me here with my siblings a lot growing up. And then as I got older, I started to bring myself here when I was a student.
And who were the artists you were looking at? Who was inspiring you?
One of the artists whose work always really stuck out to me would be Maggie Hambling.
Oh, you know I love Maggie.
Yeah. Either her portraits or her other figurative work, like her Walls of Water show. I was quite young when I saw it, and it just felt like permission to do things that were contemporary and different, but with figurative work.
So I'm delighted to say that your portrait of Lenny Henry is now in the building, and it will soon go on display. Do you want to go and see it?
Yeah, I'd love to.
Morag, when you won Portrait Artist of the Year, the big prize was a commission for the National Portrait Gallery. You don't get to choose your subject, you know, it was determined that it would be Sir Lenny Henry. How did you feel when you found out who it was going to be, and how did you approach the work?
I was really excited because I knew of his work growing up. I was just really excited to meet him. I had a lot of respect for him. And when I did meet him and we got to spend time together, he really demonstrated to me this idea that often people in very prolific positions, especially someone who's done a lot of work as an entertainer, they have a kind of their real self behind that. And often when people sit for portraits, that's the person that comes up to the surface, no matter what they do in their kind of profession or what their personality is. And Lenny was very transparent and honest about his position.
Yeah, and I think you caught that. You caught the man away from the cameras. So it feels very intimate. I mean, it's not an intimate setting. You know, it's a very grand building. It's the home of British portraiture. You know, it's the world first. But actually, increasingly with contemporary portraits, you do see this much more sort of psychological and left field approach.
I'm pleased that that's the way things are going with art and with portraiture. It fits in with, I feel, what's happening in kind of society and the way people are behaving these days. People are being more honest about emotional situations or the reality of their lives, and the fact that art is kind of taking us through history, and the portraits are doing that too in the National Portrait Gallery. I think that's a really great thing that's happening, and to be part of that is, yeah, amazing.
Well, I'm delighted. It feels like a real goosebump moment for me too. Well done. Earlier, I set artist and comedian Jim Moir the challenge of selecting the one National Portrait Gallery work that he'd most like to hang on his wall at home. I'm on my way to track him down and see what piece he's chosen. Jim, I was worried I might never see you again.
Here I am.
We're reunited. Tell me, what did you choose?
Well, I've come to, this is what I'm going to call Writer's Corner. You've got John Betjeman and T.S. Eliot, but I've gone for Linton Kwesi Johnson. And this is kind of a personal thing for me because I moved to Brixton in London in 1979, and I used to see him wandering about. I used to think he looks really cool, and I love this because he's looking off at what? I don't know, but I really like the weight of it. It's all down the bottom end, and that sort of wintry tree behind.
The tree behind it really sort of gives that sense of pensiveness. I mean, this is like an incredibly vibrant intellectual mind, this man that has so many things to say about modern Britain. And what I love about it is that it's very still, but there's a lot of activity going on.
There's a lot going on under that hat. And I've got a picture of me outside our house, our flat in Brixton in 1979, where I'm wearing a sort of, I used to call it a communist cap. It's like a communist cap and a pair of sandals. And I think I fancied myself as a beatnik, and I've got a pair of bongos in my hand. So if I could take that home...
It's a lot in that image there.
Yeah, I'd have that on one side, and then I'd maybe have me over there, so he's looking at me, going, "You young idiot."
So talk to me about the photography aspect, though. I mean, you paint a lot. Do you take photographs too?
When I was a kid, when no one took photographs, I had a box brownie that my mum had and said, "You can have that." So I took quite a lot of black and white photographs when I was a kid, you know, in the 60s and 70s. So it's always been a thing, but you can't concentrate on everything.
No, exactly.
You know, so I've always admired photographers, and especially ones who can take a simple image and make it dynamic.
So did you enjoy roaming around the gallery, the new gallery?
I just love this place. I really, really do. And it is, like I said, it's got different levels you can work on. You can go around it and then around again and forever, and then see something different. All hail the National Portrait Gallery.
Well, thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you for making me look at this. It's a brilliant work. Well done.
Goodbye, Linton. Kwesi Johnson.
Oh, that history should take such a rough route, causing us this bitterness and pain on the way, is a room full of fact you can't walk out. Fratricide is only the first phase, with brother fighting brother, stabbing brother, them just killing off them one another. But when you see your brother blood just flow, futile fighting, then you know that the first phase must come to an end, and time for the second phase to show.
From the earliest portraits in the collection to the most recent inductees, the artworks in the National Portrait Gallery are packed full of intrigue and depth. The story of portraiture is a story of power and rivalry, family and friendship. Ultimately, it's the story of us across decades and centuries. We're the observers, and we're the observed. It's been a pleasure to spend time in this amazing building and an honour to see it come back to life. The National Portrait Gallery is back, not just for our generation to enjoy and learn from, but for future generations to come.